Welcome back to Whiteout Weekly as we celebrate Penn State's walloping of the Purdue Boilermakers. 49-10 puts us at 9-1 on the season. We stay at number 4 in the college football poll. And again, Dave, I'll say it every week when I see that bracket come up, it just lights up my life.
Mm-hmm.
It's bracketology on steroids, basically. Like I check bracketology every once in a while, but this I'm just locked in. So last week, Georgia's win over Tennessee brings them back into the picture. So the current first round playoff matchup for Penn State would be the 11th seed Georgia Bulldogs coming to Happy Valley to face the sixth seed Penn State Nittany Lions. And that's exactly what I'm talking about with this bracket. It's just, you look at these games and it's like Georgia going to Penn State, Alabama potentially going to Notre Dame, Ole Miss potentially going to Indiana, and then BYU, Ohio State. That one kind of BYU, I don't really think should be, after that loss, should be in there.
No, not after losing to a pretty poor Jayhawk team. But yeah, definitely some exciting stuff. Also for me personally, obviously I live in Georgia now. My wife a Georgia grad, her family diehard Georgia fans. My family obviously Penn State fans, so there'll be a good old family clash if that
That
held
would, yeah,
true.
that would be intense.
Could be a whole family reunion trip up in Happy Valley. But I think some of the best parts of the rankings releasings on Tuesday too has been Paul Feinbaum just yapping his mouth off about how much Penn State and Indiana don't belong at the top versus his SEC allegiance. And then also the funny note from Tuesday was Booger McFarland on ESPN wrongly saying how much that Penn State struggled against UCLA this season when Penn State absolutely demolished UCLA.
Lose the
So
door.
just so just
He probably meant USC, to be honest.
he probably did, but it's just funny that it's on ESPN and it's Booger McFarland, but we'll take it.
Yeah, a lot of hate against Penn State, which understandably, given their schedule.
Mhm.
But at the time we played USC, that was like a formidable game. That was a game that
Mhm.
people had us losing, and we were getting demolished at halftime.
Mhm.
I think it says something about this team, the way that they rebounded in that second half and just completely blew the doors off them and came back to win that game,
Mhm.
which I think the committee is taking into consideration despite USC kind of falling off a cliff here to end the season. And speaking of ending the season, the regular season, because Penn State will certainly be in that college football playoff. We're down to the last 2 games. Penn State's on their second of back-to-back road games in the final leg of their regular season. They're set to face the 6-4. Here we go. Minnesota Golden Gophers in the Twin Cities at Huntington Bank Stadium. Didn't like that name. It was trying to find previous names for that stadium, and it was another bank stadium before that. So
Yeah, I think it was TCF Bank, maybe.
yeah, don't like stadiums, college stadiums named after sponsors.
Hmm.
I like the old fashioned naming after a coach, named after someone who's built the program, built it up after that, or Beaver Stadium,
Mhm.
something like that. The shoe, something like that.
Mhm.
Some kind of nickname. And that game's going to be taking place again, Huntington Bank Stadium at 3:30 on CBS. Now the line opened at 14. I think it was 13 and a half or 14.
Hmm.
And money's been flooded in on Minnesota to drop this line to minus 11 with minus 112 juice. So I think that's going to go up to 11 and a half. And I have the over under on DraftKings at 45 on the dot. Do you do the same?
Yep.
All righty. Weird action on the money. I think people are trying to get that under 2 touchdowns to be able to take Penn State.
Hmm.
Again, early bets under 10,000. Who knows what's going to happen? But let's focus on the Golden Gophers, led by PJ Fleck in his 8th year with Minnesota, eligible for a bowl with 6 wins on the season, making that 6 bowl appearances during his tenure. And he is 5-0 in those bowl games with Minnesota. So the Golden Gophers were rolling for a bit. They battled Michigan in Ann Arbor, lost in a hard fought battle by a touchdown or a field goal, and then went on a 4 game winning streak before absolutely laying an egg last week against Rutgers, losing 26-19, possibly looking ahead to this Penn State game, bringing in a top 5 opponent to the Twin Cities. Definitely a spot where they were looking ahead.
Hmm.
So some big picture stats that I think are pertinent to this game. So Penn State pass defense ranks 5th in the Big Ten, giving up 176 yards per game, allowing 9 touchdowns and capturing 8 interceptions. Meanwhile, Minnesota, right behind them, 6th in the Big Ten, allowing 176.6 yards per game, 9 touchdowns allowed. But here's the big kicker: 16 interceptions for the Golden Gophers secondary. Some more stats. Penn State first in total offense in the Big Ten, averaging 454.1 yards per game. Minnesota 14th in the Big Ten total offense, 333.3 yards per game. And the big kicker with those numbers is Minnesota's rushing defense versus Penn State's 200 rushing yards per game average. That's second in the Big Ten. Minnesota's rushing defense 11th in the Big Ten, giving up almost 120 yards per game. So this looks like it's going to be a Singleton and Katron Allen show. However, over the past 3 weeks, Tyler Warren has been the leading rusher of 2 of those games. So what the heck is going on in the backfield? And last week, even, Bo Pribula was second in rushing. So what's with Singleton and Allen? Is it the offensive line? They're not seeing holes.
I think there's definitely with Singleton, there's definitely something going on. Obviously, as we always mention, Penn State doesn't disclose injuries, but every week seems to be a question of whether Singleton, or at least as of late, whether he's a full go in practice and will be for the game. So he's definitely dealing with something that's been lingering or nagging. But ultimately, when he does suit up, he has a huge impact. And then from Katron, he's always or has continued to be kind of that steady force where you know what you're going to get from him. But I think what they've been able to get from Tyler Warren is just so unique, and the different ways that they've been able to line him up, and the fact that he can be playing a key role as a blocker, sealing the edge for Katron or for Singleton. And then the very next snap, he could be behind center dashing through the defense for 49 yards for a touchdown. Just speaks to how they've been able to identify how to keep defenses off guard with Warren, but definitely not the production that we had anticipated between Katron and Singleton on a consistent week in and week out basis. But given the fact that Warren's been able to go off, especially his last couple weeks, has definitely shown that with Kotelnicki's scheme and his pre-snap motion, they've been able to find holes to be able to get the running game going.
Yeah. And I mean, no discredit to Tyler Warren lining up in the backfield in those wildcat formations, but I would like to see a little bit more, him in as an inline tight end,
Mm-hmm.
running those backs 5 yards, head of steam through a hole created by an up and coming offensive
Mm-hmm.
line. One last thing, the turnover margin. Minnesota is really good, as I said, with 16 interceptions at taking the ball away. And they're not good at giving their opponents extra chances. So they're tied for seventh in the nation in turnover margin. 16 interceptions plus 14 fumble recoveries. That's 20 caused turnovers this season, compared to only 4 fumbles and 4 interceptions on the year. So 20-8 turnover or takeaway to turnover ratio for them. So huge thing, huge macro thing for Penn State,
Mm-hmm.
taking care of the ball. And so Minnesota's been given, like I said, they were on a roll for a little bit after that Michigan game. They've been giving Big Ten opponents some trouble,
Mm-hmm.
historically, Penn State. And this year, PJ Fleck is rolling out fifth-year senior Max Brosmer. Love the name. What can you tell me about him as a player? Because I love that name.
Yeah, Brosmer, fifth year senior, has not spent his career at Minnesota. We've been used to in the past, and when you think of Minnesota QBs, or really one comes to mind in recent memory, which was Tanner Morgan, who
McManus,
unfortunately,
right? Was he Minnesota?
Khalid Manis, yep, that's right. So Khalid Manis, and then before that, Tanner Morgan, who regretfully for Penn State fans, played a role in that 2019 upset, which was the last time that Penn State traveled to Minneapolis in that top 10 matchup, both teams undefeated, where the Golden Gophers came out on top 31-26. But for Brosmer, was an interesting portal get from Minnesota. He's a transfer from FCS program New Hampshire. But really, what he's proven this year is that he's very efficient, makes smart decisions with the ball, completing over 67% of his passes. He's actually on track to be the most accurate or have the most accurate season for a Minnesota quarterback.
Huh.
I believe it is of all time, or at least in quite some time here, with that completion percentage. Throwing for over 2,200 yards, like you mentioned, 14 touchdowns, 4 picks. And with those 4 picks, he actually has not turned the ball over since September. So he's been extremely effective with the ball, and he's
Wow.
also
Did not
accounted
know that.
for 4 touchdowns. So he's a smart kid. He makes the right plays at the right time, and with that turnover note, he's prone to not turning over the football, which has kept them in a lot of games. He's one of the more definitely one of the more underrated QBs in the Big Ten, especially this season with making the jump from FCS to Big Ten, and has been able to keep them in a lot of ball games. And the thing with PJ Fleck and with Minnesota, very similar, very comparable to Iowa, where they're not going to have the top tier 4-star, 5-star recruits. They get their in-state guys, and they have enough of a collection of talent where they're able to stay in ball games and keep them
Huh.
close, which does make this matchup of when you look at the last couple matchups for Penn State here on the schedule, understanding that they just have Maryland to close out the year, but this is definitely probably for me the more nerve-wracking of these last few matchups here, especially with it being on the road. But Brosmer's been solid. His number one target, who he likes to get the ball, is actually one of my impact players. That's Daniel Jackson. He's the leading, from a reception standpoint, leads the team in receptions on the air with 63 catches, 712 yards, only three touchdowns, but averaging 11, about just over 11 yards per catch. And then he's got at least 4 games this year where he's gone for 7 receptions or more, including 7 catches for 70 yards against Rutgers. So Brosmer likes to get him the ball, and he
Yeah,
finds ways to be able to get him the ball.
absolute beast, by the way, Daniel Jackson.
Yeah,
Absolute beast of a route runner.
yeah. But yeah, so Brosmer's solid. It's going to be a tough challenge, but yeah, I think if Penn State's able to get after him, then they should be okay. But
Yeah, I think that's going to be. I don't know if I have it as my key, but one of the keys is getting to Brosmer,
mhm.
taking advantage of that offensive line. I don't think they face really elite pass rushers at all this year. I mean, they opened with UNC,
Mhm.
Michigan. I mean, their defensive line strength kind of comes from the interior. So, yeah, really haven't faced many speed ed- edge rushers. So,
Yeah, and they did give up 4 sacks against Rutgers too, who was just consistently just rushing the front four, and they were able to get to him. So
yeah, excited for that. But I am nervous about Darius Taylor,
yeah.
true sophomore, 6 foot, 215 pound back, who's also second on the team in receptions with 45, leads all Big Ten running backs with for those 45 receptions on 50 targets. So he's catching 90% of the balls thrown his way.
Mhm.
And he's second in the Big Ten among running backs with 312 receiving yards. So not only is this kid powerful in the run game, he can catch the ball in space and make guys miss. So on the ground, he's averaging almost 5 yards carry, 4.9, along with nine rushing touchdowns. Again, giving his receiving totals, he also has two, so 11 total touchdowns on the year and 31 missed tackles forced, ninth in the Big Ten, two behind Quinchon Judkins from Ohio State, just for perspective. So that is my number one impact player that we have to contain
Mhm.
if we want to beat Minnesota. And like we previously mentioned, PG Fleck said that this might be one of the most talented defensive line units that he's had at Minnesota, and it shows up in those sack and pressure numbers.
Mhm.
I'm going to focus on their senior edge rusher, Jaw Joyner, 6'5", 265 pounds. He's garnering some NFL draft buzz in his senior year. He leads the team with 27 pressures, 6 QB hits, 4.5 sacks, 2 forced fumbles on the season, and get this, 7 pass deflections.
Mhm.
Well, JJ Watt. So he's going to be a force along with a bunch of other guys on their line, mainly Anthony Smith. He's an interior defensive lineman, second on the team with 21 pressures and 4 sacks. But I don't think that these this type of talent isn't anything that the Penn State offensive line hasn't seen before. And I think they're going to be able to handle
Yeah.
that front four. They rotate 5 guys in, but I
Mhm.
think they'll be able to handle them, given that they've gone against superior talent before, and they're going
Yeah.
to be game ready for this one. Besides the, so yeah, only 2 players for me that I really had to look at. I was almost going to put their kicker as one of my impact players, He hits it from like if they go over the 40-yard line, he's good.
Hmm.
He can hit it from 50 if he wants to. But turn to you. Who do you got as an impact player to watch for Minnesota that we need to stop?
Yeah, so for one, I already mentioned Daniel Jackson, but number one for me, sticking on the defensive side of the ball in that secondary, we already talked through the how opportunistic this defense is with forcing turnovers. The key cog in that has really been Coy Parrish, true freshman defensive backs, number three. It's actually the second highest rated recruit all time for Minnesota in their
Wow.
football history, or at least since the internet recruiting rankings have gotten started over the last several years. But he's got five picks on the year, which is tied for, I want to say it's second most in the country. He had a two interception game against UCLA. He's definitely, as a true freshman, become a leader on this defense. Plays a key role in the return game too. And then again, just to kind of talk through with him being the second highest rated recruit, there was a lot of powerhouse programs that were after him. I think last
Where is
year
he from?
he's from Minnesota, Echo,
Okay.
Minnesota.
Okay. That's why. That's why.
So he's a hometown kid. I think or approaching last year's National Signing Day, Ryan Day from Ohio State had even chartered a private jet to his hometown in Echo or Duluth, Minnesota, to meet with him and try to get him to sign with Ohio State. Decided to stay home, and PJ Fleck and crew are definitely happy that he did. He's having an impact right out the gate, and he's definitely one to look out for. And gotta keep the ball out of this kid's hands and make sure that you're making good solid throws, good solid decisions, or else he'll pounce.
Definitely agree with that. And to go off that, Purdue, Minnesota does play a lot of zone coverage.
Mhm.
So yeah, he can definitely pounce on a ball. And going back to I think the USC game where Aller threw two picks,
Mhm.
or was it
Three
three?
picks actually.
Three picks. Yeah. So gotta be careful with that soft zone coverage. But I mean, we have the cheat code with Tyler Warren. He might have the game of his life if Minnesota plays that soft zone because
Mhm.
he's just innately so good at finding those soft spots in the zone that if they're just going to run that, Al's going to pass to him all day, force them to come up or force them to back off, excuse me. Hopefully, get the running game going so that our tight end is not our leading rusher for our third week in 4 games. Um, but my matchup, besides Tyler Warren, because he's going to win his matchup, is the other receivers Drew Aller has to throw to.
Mhm.
He's there's been some guys that have stepped up in games that we needed them to, particularly Trey Wallace and Mari Evans. But I want to see Penn State become a more well-rounded team in terms of running and passing the ball, actually having a pass threat, like deep pass threat. So when it comes to playoff time, that doesn't end up biting us in the ass.
Mhm.
And I think, like I said, Tyler Warren's going to have a huge game if they end up playing that soft zone coverage, but don't need anything crazy.
Mhm.
Just, some life out of Trey Wallace, Mari Evans, Liam Clifford, Khalil Dinkins, etc. Just to, kind of calm my nerves that we
Yep.
can, if we need to, pass the ball. And part part of that falls on Andy Kotelnicki. So if he's not able to scheme guys open, or if guys are just not able to get open on the routes, it's going to go to Drew Aller. Get those first downs using his legs. And he's been so good at it this year. Going through his reads, knowing when it's time to tuck the ball bring it upfield. He's fourth in the Big Ten with 19 rushes for a first down. So all of that basically is my matchup to win. Drew Aller, the soft zone coverage, and him getting easy passes to his receivers to open up the run game. And hopefully we can get Singleton or Allen going.
Mm-hmm.
What would your matchup to win be? Minnesota's a sneaky team, very sneaky team.
They are. They're very sneaky. And like I said, this is definitely a matchup where, although being an 11 and a half point favorite, definitely has me a little worried. But then again, when you look at it in the scheme of it, it's for me, it's really a simple recipe. Is my matchup is really just don't beat yourself. And despite all the frustrations that I know I had, that you've had, that the fan base has had with not being able to win that big one against Ohio State, the one thing that has boded well for Penn State this year and definitely has proven to be as well for the playoff committee is that we've ultimately taken care of business against all opponents that we've needed to. And this is a fine example heading into Saturday where if you don't beat yourself, then you should beat this team.
Mm-hmm.
Minnesota's defense, they've definitely wreaked havoc this year, as we've mentioned a few times here in the turnover department, which has definitely been advantageous for them and their close score wins. Their wins are typically one score ball games, and Brosmer, who we talked about, has shown that when the game stays close, he's able to make some key plays and get them down the field. And when you look at their losses, opening weekend against UNC, he did everything that he needed to. Ultimately, Minnesota's kicker, who we were talking about, who can drill him from deep, missed the field goal, and they lost by 2.
Yeah, not good
So,
and short, good and deep.
yeah. Uh, but uh, but yeah, I think this is one where for me, it's yeah, obviously you want to win the turnover battle, but I think it's almost even just it's a null where you don't turn the ball over. Obviously, we'd love to have some turnovers, but if Penn State stays consistent of what they've been able to do, whether that's running Tyler Warren, I know we want to see the running backs get going, but Drew Aller taking care of the football, this should be a ball game where if you get at least get up into the 20s, 21, 25 points should be enough to win this game, especially with how well this defense has been playing. And I know we've struggled in spots this year, namely, or not so namely, against Bowling Green, against USC, the Ohio State matchup. But one of the things that Franklin highlighted this week in his presser was, the fact that Tom Allen's not getting as much credit as he thinks that he deserves. And when you look at their defense, I mean, in points per game this year, they're sixth in the country, fourth in total defense, and I think it's fifth in rushing yards allowed. So the defense has been sound all year, and there's no reason they shouldn't be here. Should be able to, if they can shut down that running game, which Rutgers showed they were able to do. I think Minnesota only had 35 rushing yards against Rutgers. So if you can force them to be one-dimensional and force Brosmer to have to throw the ball more than 20 times, 30 times this game and allow the pass rushers to get after him, then it should bode well for Penn State, and they should be able to cover here and come out of Minnesota unscathed.
Yeah, going back to your Allen comment, I totally agree. I think people after the Bowling Green game, especially, people were kind of like, "What the fuck is this?
Yeah.
This is the guy we hired. Bowling Green's putting up like points on us," and people kind of had that in the back of their head, like, "Remember that Bowling Green game? Like,
Yeah.
they kind of put up points on us, but he's been able to rebound and definitely put that defense in a place to absolutely dominate the Big Ten. They're obviously in the top five in pretty much every metric."
Mm-hmm.
And going off again, what you said, not shooting ourselves in the foot. Minnesota, Penn State tied this year, 52 penalties each.
Mm-hmm.
So again, yeah, cannot shoot ourselves in the split in the foot, especially when we're tied with penalty wise with them. Very disciplined team. So I mentioned Tyler Warren. If they're on that zone coverage, he's going to have a huge game. But mentioned previously, my iron line to watch this week will be none other than number 11, Abdul Carter, who has been absolutely on fire lately.
Mhm.
I love doing mock drafts, and at the beginning of the year, he was mocked like close to the end of the first round. So I was like, maybe the Eagles could grab him. That'd be pretty sick. But his play, he's pretty much worked himself into a top 10 pick status.
Mhm.
Um, Minnesota, again, has not really faced many premier speed edge rushers like Denai Dennison and Abdul. And here's what number 11 has done over the past 3 games, going back to Ohio State: 15 pressures, 4 sacks, and has over a 30% win rate while pass rushing. So I think the fire is going to keep spreading. Abdul's going to have at least 1 sack in this game. Continue to move his name up the draft board despite that being contradictory to what I want for the Eagles. This is a Penn State podcast. So let's go, Abdul. Get that top 10 pick, baby.
Speaking of top 10, I don't know how many people caught it, but there was a quick pan to the crowd in the Purdue game, and they were showing Abdul's family, and premier sports agent Drew Rosenhaus was sitting there with his family. So he's locked in on Abdul, ready for that big payday.
Drew, how is he? How's he always there?
Yeah,
Was he there with Tyreek Hill during that situation? Like the first week of the season when he got pulled over?
I think so.
Yeah. Dude, he reps everybody. Drew Rosenhaus, goddamn.
Ugh. All right, for me, for my iron line to watch, it's got to be Tyler Warren. We've been talking about him a ton here, not just in the rushing game, but all facets. The Heisman buzz is very, very real, although it may still seem like a little bit of a long shot. I think the last rankings or poll, if you will, had Warren slotted in there at number 6.
Yeah, that Twitter troll who said Tyler Warren has no chance because James Franklin blew it against Ohio State. You know,
Yeah, he's. I think
go
if he
go do it yourself.
yeah, if he's able to put up numbers like he has been all season, these last couple of games, I think it's a weird year where typically, there's not a real clear number one. I know you could say Oregon, but they looked pretty suspect in Camp Randall against Wisconsin. But it's not that normal year where you just have the quarterback for the number one team in the country is a surefire Heisman pick. You got Travis Hunter in the mix. You got Ashton Genty. You got Cam Ward. So Tyler Warren's one though, where if you're not watching every single down, it's hard to truly see the impact that he has on the game, especially in the number of unique ways that he lines up and how he helps his team. But ultimately, the stats have been compiling, and especially over the last several weeks, and he's got some key games, especially that USC game with 17 catches. So I think if he can put up another big time performance here, a couple touchdowns, a handful of catches, maybe over 100 yards and some rushing yards here, I think he could continue that momentum. And I think it's still a little bit of a long shot to get him a seat in the top 3 for the final Heisman ceremony, but Lord knows I'd love to be able to see him there and be able to see a Nittany Lion sitting there. Even if he doesn't win it, let's be in that top 3, I think would be a pretty cool moment.
I'm gonna look this up to tweet out later. Has there ever been a tight end
Hmm.
Heisman finalist? Do you know off the top of your head? Wow, this is
None
pretty.
that comes to mind.
So only 14 tight ends have ever finished in the top 10 for Heisman voting.
Oh wow.
Three finished in the top four. Bill McColl, Stanford, 1951.
Mm.
Penn Stater, Ted Qualick, sorry, Penn State 1968, and Ken McAfee, Notre Dame 1977. So we're due. We're due.
Very due. Well
We're
overdue.
due. Needed. Speaking of due, Dave, you're due. You're falling behind hard. Better stock up on some bubble wrap
Uh,
because the Big Ten
no.
betting bonanza is going a certain way that Dave does not want. Gonna have to spend some money on shipping that dumbbell back to Pennsylvania, possibly, as
Mm.
we head into week number 13 of the greatest betting competition on planet Earth, the Big Ten betting bonanza. Week number 13 of the Big Ten betting bonanza, and it is becoming apparent that Dave might need to stock up on some bubble wrap to send that dumbbell back to me, as I had a perfect 3-0 week, hit Rutgers money line, saw Kalamanaga back, saw that was a trap game for Minnesota, win straight up. I had Wisco first half +7.5, and they actually were winning the game against Oregon at halftime, 10-6. I don't know if you saw Oregon got into the red zone. Dylan Gabriel threw an interception and
Uh,
absolutely had a spaz attack. And that's
yeah.
all right. This first half spread might hit. And then in our battle, my spontaneous battle, USC pulls it out 28-20 over Nebraska. I'll let Dave explain that bad beat as he went the total opposite direction of myself. I'm sorry for laughing. 0-3 in week 12. No bonanza points. But I went 3-0 with the two spread victories, +1, with a money line victory underdog that's +3. So I'm at +5 points last week. Dave, 0-3 last week. Tried to hit the Friday Night Fever with UCLA money line. Unfortunately, they lost to Washington 31-19. Lost on the Maryland Rutgers over 52.5. That finished at 31-17. And then again, the battle. Nebraska, he had the money line +240. I just didn't have a pick. So I just went USC -7.5. And they won 28-20. Did not watch that game, be completely honest. So it feels like something happened where a bad beat might be in play here. Am I right on that, or was that just a late comeback by Nebraska?
Yeah, Nebraska had an opportunity down at the end. They were down in the red zone or close to the red zone. There was a very controversial no pass interference call in the end zone, but ultimately, true freshman Patrick Mahomes lookalike Dylan Raiola, uh, as shown in a lot of spots this year as a young QB, where he's missed some throws and unfortunately it's been some clutch throws, but he was ultimately bested by uh, Jordan Maeva for USC. So USC had a change at the helm. No more Miller Moss. It was Jordan Maeva
Yep,
who
the
ultimately was able to get
UNLV transfer. Mm-hmm.
uh-huh
Do all
was able
about it.
to to get the best of Dylan Raiola in this one and ultimately cost me another bonanza loss. So,
I know he's only a freshman, but he's really had to fall off from the
mhm,
beginning of the season.
yeah.
Demo again, only a freshman. He's got tons and tons of time to work that back. So on the season, Dave is 14, 18, and 1
Mm.
with 16 bonanza points. I have officially crossed over the 500 mark, 17, 15, and 1 with 25 bonanza points. So you were down 9 bonanza points
Oof.
heading into 2 weeks left. Got the Comms Championship, and then we'll do a bowl extravaganza with 3 picks each. So, given that I went through it now, I will not be a gracious God this go around. Bringing out the victory book. I don't
Rightfully
know what
so.
to call it. So let's see what you're not gonna pick. All right, let's go with this one. So Maryland's coming off that win over, or no, it wasn't Maryland. Who did Maryland beat last week?
Rutgers.
USC?
Rutgers.
Rutgers. Oh yeah, Minnesota's off. So Maryland coming off that win over Rutgers, facing Iowa, coming off a bye. This will be Maryland's home finale, aka their senior day. And they, in the past 7 seasons, are 1-6 straight up and 3-4 against the spread. I think Maryland's getting a little overhyped after that win. Iowa's only -6 going on the road after a bye week to College Park. Give me, this goes against all my religion. Iowa Hawkeyes -6.5, my first pick
Mm.
over Maryland at Maryland. -6 at MD. What you got?
First pick, swinging for the fences.
Got to. Have to at this point.
Have to. Going to Fox Big Noon. Matchup of the probably matchup of the weekend. Is the matchup of the weekend. Of course, it's a noon game. We got Hoosiers traveling to the shoe.
Freaking
Take
Ohio State,
on
those noon games. God damn them.
taking on the Ohio State Buckeyes. For Penn State fans everywhere who would love to still see a trip to Indianapolis for the Big Ten title, we should be rooting for Ohio State in this one. So I think scenario wise, the best case scenario for Penn State would be a Ohio State win, followed by an Ohio State loss next weekend to Michigan, and then Indiana win against Purdue next weekend. But this is the Big Ten betting bonanza. I need some points. So I am riding the Indiana Kurt Signetti vibes on this one. I am taking the IU money line.
All
I
righty.
believe they are 10.5 point dogs,
All
if I'm
right.
not mistaken. So I am taking the Hoosiers outright, keep the vibes rolling, and they move to 11-0.
That's a +5 with the money line.
Get me back in the competition.
I like that. I like that. Okay. I'll I'll stick with that same game, actually, just because a little better than you. So Ohio State, Indiana, Ohio State has won 29 straight. Something's gotta give. So I think your Indiana money line might be Can they get to 30 in a row? I don't know.
Mm.
But
It's hard to beat a team 30 times in
it's
a
it's hard to beat a team 30 times. That's good. That's good. It is hard to beat a team 30 times because
Uh,
I'm not gonna fall for it. Uh, six of the last seven in this matchup have gone over, despite Indiana's previous 7 years not being what it has been this year. Over under is 52 and a half. Give me the over in that
mm.
big noon kickoff. Ohio State, Indiana over you 52 and a half. Are you seeing the same?
Yeah.
All right. Over 2.5.
All right. Pick number two. I'm digging back into the Friday Night Fever well.
Oh no.
We have Sparty taking on the woeful Purdue
I
Boilermakers.
saw the Friday Night Fever game and I was like, I don't want any part of this. Any part of this.
Purdue continues, as we saw firsthand last weekend, continues to be an absolute train wreck. Sparty not having the best of seasons, but they are 4-6 and fighting for their bowl lives. They are home in this one. Don't know how much of an impact that will have when you have 4-6 versus 1-8 coming up on Thanksgiving week. So from a crowd turnout, might be a bring your own energy game, but Sparty is minus 14 and a half. And I'm taking Sparty in this one. Purdue continues the spiral downward. Sparty's fighting for a bowl. And give me Michigan State.
Minus 14 and a half.
Yes.
All right. The big spread for the Spartans. Um, I'm gonna go. I didn't. This is my last one. Yeah. I thought you were gonna take something in this game. I imagine you will with your last pick, but I'm gonna go with the Penn State
Mm.
Minnesota Golden Gophers first half under 22 and a half. Check out that bet. Both teams known for bleeding the clock. Penn State start is known this season starting slow. So I think this bet first half under, I'm going double units on
Mm.
this. Three touchdowns in the first half. I don't think so. I think it's going to be a slow roll in first half.
I like that.
Minnesota will get maybe a couple of those 50-yard field goals. Penn State might score a touchdown, a field goal. I think it stays close in the first half, and then, like Penn State does, pulls away in the second half. So my third and final bet, I'm going weird this week. Penn State, Minnesota, first half, under 22 and a half.
Raunchy. Like it.
You know I want to win this. Don't know
Yeah.
that. I'm pulling bets out like that.
All right, for my final pick, I wasn't going to because I was almost certain that you'd take it, but you are exactly right. I will stick with that one. And as we said all along, all season long, Penn State takes care of business. They are the cover kings. Bo Perbula is the cover king. Penn State, 11 and a half. Give it to me all day.
Love it. Love it. Yeah. Opening as a 14-point favorite, and then money coming in on Minnesota
Mhm.
after. Yeah, I think that's a very sharp bet there. So that will
Has to be
do
sharp.
it for week 13 of the Big Ten Big Bonanza. I'm not going to tell you to trail my picks because anything can happen, but I am pretty hot as of late with this book. Above 500 for the first time. Thank you all once again for listening to two Penn State alumni try to relive their glory days, talk about Penn State football, something we are both so passionate about. And again, thank you for everything you've done on social media, the follows, the likes, the retweets, the support, everything. It really, really means the world to us. And we notice every single interaction. So I really, really appreciate you guys. And we got 2 weeks left before the first ever 12 team college football playoff. And I can't wait for next week when that bracket comes out.
Mm-hmm.
We see who's facing who for the second to last time, correct?
Mm-hmm.
It'll be week 14, championship week, and then Army Navy week.
Yep.
And there it is. But we'll be going on because Penn State is headed to that college football playoff. Love you guys. Thank you all so much. If you made it this far on YouTube or iTunes or Spotify, please leave us a rating or like and subscribe if you're watching on YouTube. Absolutely love you guys. We could not do this without you. And we will see you after beating the Minnesota Golden Gophers.
Down with the Gophers.
Down with the Gophers. Love y'all.